Alrighty, so let's just go ahead and delete everything, and then I'm just going to go ahead and drag in my reference image here, which you can find in the resources section of my Discord server. With this in, I'm just going to go Alt-R to reset the rotation. Oops, Alt-R, and then Shift-S and selection to cursor just to put it back to the center. We can go R, X, and 90 to rotate at 90 degrees along the X-axis, and then G, Y, and 7, just so that we've got a little bit of space here to model with, and our reference in the background. So let's go ahead, let's bring in a circle, and we can just leave this at 32 verts. I think that's fine for this model. And we can go R, Y, and 90 to rotate 90 degrees along the Y-axis. And I'm just going to roughly line this up at the back here. So just move that, scale it down, not quite in the center, so I'll just bring it up a little bit. Scale down to around there. So I think that's about good. And then in edit mode, with vertex selection mode, I'm just going to extrude along the X-axis, just roughly match this up, so something like that seems alright. And then you'll notice we've got these red faces going on here. If you don't see those, then you can just enable the face orientation here in your viewport overlays, which is very handy. And so they're facing the wrong way because they're red, so I'm just going to select everything, Alt-N and flip. Cool, and then I'm just going to go Control-R to cut in 2 loops into the center here, and then S, Shift-X to scale on everything but the X-axis, and just scale this out to roughly match with our reference image here. I'm not too worried about matching it perfectly because it is just a reference image after all. Cool, so then we've got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these little rungs here. So an easy way to do that is getting an array modifier. So we'll go array. And this is going the wrong way at the moment, so we don't want 1 on the X. We'll go 1 on the Z-axis. And I'm pretty sure it's the Z-axis because it's going off of the normal or the local Z-axis. So if we just change this to normal, you'll notice that that's the way that the Z is facing. So I'm pretty sure that's why that's happening there. And we can just bump this count up to 8. And that lines up pretty nicely, but we're just missing one part of detail here. And that's just the fact that there's like a little bridge in between each of these. So a simple thing we can do here back in edit mode is if we just alt select this edge here, E to extrude, and just drag it out a little bit on the X-axis, we can sort of get that. But the only problem is that now that's sort of extended all of this beyond our reference, so it doesn't match up as nicely. But just in object mode, if we go S and X, we can scale back on the X-axis and just sort of line that up just a little bit better. It's not perfect. And I kind of feel like these are a little bit too thin, so I'm just going to go select this rung here, S, X, and just sort of thicken those out a little bit. And I think that gives a bit of a nicer shape to everything. It doesn't perfectly match our reference, but it is just a reference at the end of the day. Cool, so let's go ahead, Shift A, let's bring in a cylinder, and this cylinder will also be at 32 verts. And I'm going to go S to scale, Shift and Z to scale on everything but the Z-axis. And I'm just going to scale this down and roughly match it up with the handle here. So I'm just going to do another scale. So somewhere around there is okay. Then what we want to do, because we're going to boolean this from this mesh here, and to make it a little bit easier, what we're going to do to line this up perfectly is, first of all, we'll apply this array modifier. So just make sure you enable merge here, and it will automatically merge all of the arrayed objects. So we can just go Control A to apply that array. And I want you to go Control R to cut in a loop cut along this second rung here. So put that in the middle of these faces. And the reason we're going to do that is because we want to align this edge of our cylinder with this edge of our actual model here. So an easy way that we can do that is in our snapping tools here, we can set the snap base to active and the snap target to vertex. And then if you press G and hold down, we'll go G, X, so we're just limiting it along the X-axis, and then hold down Control, you'll notice that we're only moving and snapping our cylinder at the exact vertice increments of our other model. And we can snap that to that new edge that we cut in because of the vertice sitting here. So when I'm happy with that, I'm just going to press Enter. And we've snapped that into place. And I'm not too worried about what the reference image is saying now, because now I'm just going to model based off of what looks good for the object here. And I don't really like how high this cut is coming in at the back here. So I'm just going to go S, Shift Z again, scale this in, and just sort of have this roughly sit around halfway along the edge of this face here. I think looks quite nice. Cool. So with that, if you have bool tools enabled, what you can do is with the cylinder selected, we can shift select our model here, go Control Shift and B, and we can run a brush boolean difference operation here. If you don't have bool tools enabled, first I'd recommend going and enabling it, but if you just want to do it normally, then what you can do is you can select the cylinder here, add a modifier, get a boolean. We can just use the eyedropper to select our cylinder, and then to replicate the look of bool tools, what we can do is just select the cylinder, go to our object data, viewport display, and just change the display from textured to bounds, and now we get that exact same look. Bool tools just speeds the process up for you effectively. It does nothing different in Blender. Cool. So before we apply the boolean modifier, what I want you to do is, with the cylinder selected, just go into edit mode, make sure you select everything of the cylinder, go Control E, and we're going to mark as sharp. Now, the only reason we're doing this is to just make it easier to track the edges that we want to keep with our topology cleanup here, which will make a little bit more sense in just a second. So let's go back to our main object here, and we'll go to our boolean, and we'll go Control A to apply, and then we can just hide the bound cylinder. And so you'll notice it will have cut the actual cylinder back into our mesh, which normally you wouldn't want, but in this instance it actually works really quite nicely. And the reason being is because it's transferred all that sharp data over, which tells us, you know, we want to keep these ones, and we kind of want to merge the rest of the object to the cylinder so that we keep that nice circular and rounded shape of our cylinder and don't distort that. So let's just go ahead, we'll select that top face that's been booleaned into our mesh, and we can just drag it down on the Z-axis until it roughly matches up with our reference image. And then to sort of speed things up here, what we can do is let's Alt select this row of faces here, H to hide, L to select the remainder, Alt H, P, and separate by selection. So now we've just cut off this end part, so we can just hide that, and we've isolated this section here. And what we can do is, so that we only need to do a quarter of the work here, is we can cut this into quarters. So I'm just going to go to vertex select mode. Oops, actually before I do this, let's just delete the face at the bottom here. And so in vertex select mode, I'm going to select the top half here, so just before the middle section right there. So just delete all those verts. And then similarly, just select this side, but just before this middle section of verts here, and delete those verts. And then what we can do is we can bring in a mirror modifier, and we can mirror it about the Y and Z axes, which has not worked nicely at all. And that's because I just screwed up where we placed the origin point, which is all right. We can fix this quite easily. Let's just select this edge down here and make sure we've got clipping enabled. Vertice down here, vertex. Just drag this along the Y until it snaps into the center. We'll go Shift S, cursor to selected, tab back into edit mode, and then we'll go origin to 3D cursor, and then we can just delete that vertice. And then it's all good. Cool. Sorry about that. Alright, so we kind of want to merge all of the topology of our main model back into the red creased areas so that we don't distort the topology or the curvature of the cylinder too much. So let's go ahead. First of all, let's dissolve this edge here because it doesn't really serve much of a purpose and it doesn't add too much to the curvature, and you're not really going to notice it if it's gone. So just Control X to dissolve that. Then what we can do is let's merge. I know we said we're going to merge the object to the sharps, but in this instance, we're going to merge this vertex here, or vertex here, down to this one here. So we can just go merge at last. It's moved it a little bit, and technically, yes, it will have slightly distorted the surface normals of our cylinder, but it's pretty minimal here, so I think it's all right for us to get away with doing that. We can kind of do the same here, so let's just go ahead and merge at, merge at last, not first, sorry. Merge it last down there. This one's different. This one we definitely want to merge over to this side because it's going to make less of an impact on the shading of this face here, and it would make more of an impact on the cylinder if we were to merge that. Merge it the other way around. This one here, let's just merge up into this corner, so merge it last there. And it's kind of getting a little bit messy, but it's nothing too bad. I know you're probably going like, oh no, there's Ngons and triangles and all this. Don't worry, we'll make it all shade nicely, I promise you. And then down here, we've got a few verts going on here, so I'm just going to zoom in to select them all. So I'm just going to select this grouping over here, and then I'm going to select this corner, and I'm going to merge these at last here. Once again, yes, we've kind of moved and distorted the shape of the cylinder a little bit, but I think for how minimal it is, it's not going to be amazingly noticeable. And then I'm just going to run a quick space operation between these points here to just clean up any of the distortions that we did introduce. Cool. So what I want to do here is I want to add a bit of a support loop into this area here, just so that we get nice creasing along our edges here. And so I think the easiest way to do this is let's just use our knife tool. Let's redirect this edge to be resolving down here. So we can just Control X to dissolve that. And now we've introduced a big Ngon here, but what we can do is we can subdivide these three edges here. So we'll go subdivide, and then we can just use K, our knife tool, to cut this in. And now you'll notice we've got a nice set of quads supporting our edge here, ignoring the fact that there's a triangle here and an Ngon here. These will actually resolve quite nicely, believe it or not, so don't panic. And yes, we also have an Ngon here, but once again, that's actually going to resolve quite nicely, and I will show and explain exactly why that works, but just trust me here for a second. And so for the most part, we're actually pretty well done here cleaning this up, so we can just do a little bit more. So I'm just going to use the knife tool to cut these together. So now we get just some isolated quads in here. And we do have an Ngon leading into this section here, which isn't going to resolve as nicely as these ones over here. So what we can do is just go Control R, cut in a loop through the center, and then use our knife tool, just connect those up. And then we've got some pretty nice results going around here. So that's pretty good in my eyes. Let's just select everything, Control E, and we'll clear the sharps. Let's go ahead, shade this smooth, and let's get a subdivision surface modifier in here. I'm going to crack this up to 4. And so we can see that there's a few issues going on, and this is mainly just due to some unresolved merging of vertices. So let's see what's happening. So I can see there's a bit of a problem here. So yeah, it just looks like some things haven't merged properly. So I'm just going to see if I can clean most of these up. So I'm just going to select everything with A and then merge by distance. And so I can see that that's cleaned up at least 2. So this area is a little bit better now. That might have fixed most of it. I think the rest of the shading issues that we're seeing here are just a result of a lack of creasing and support loops. So let's start to add that in so we can get a better idea of what's happening. So I'm just going to select along the bottom here and then around these sides. So just alt selecting these ones, and on the inside here as well. And we can crease this back edge as well. So let's go Shift A 0.55 so we can add a crease to all that. And then if we view it with our subdiv on, you'll notice it's looking okay mostly at the top here, but it's definitely heavily distorted here. So what we can do to help out with this is we can go Control R to add a loop at the bottom here, and we can just do a loop slide up and start to crush those in on themselves a little bit, just like this. And now we get much nicer shading around that bottom part, and we haven't heavily distorted our cylinder either, and so that's pretty much the crux of it. And you know, we don't have any complicated poles around here or anything of the sorts. It's all very simple, and it just works quite nicely. Now, if you're sort of looking at this area and going like, oh, well, hang on, you know, you've got an Ngon here, you need to resolve that. Not necessarily, and this does work quite nicely, and I can show you with a harsher matte cap here. We actually do get really nice shading on it. It doesn't deform or distort or anything outrageous. And you're completely right in saying, you know, well, why don't you just go ahead and, you know, add a loop cut through here. So I'll just show you this. Let's subdivide this and cut this through. Bring this down. Because, you know, now this is more quad based, and, you know, then you can try to chuck in an extra loop here and place this in over here. And this does also totally work. The only thing is that now we've introduced more topology into our original circle, so then we'd need to do more work in trying to keep this a consistent circle shape, and that's going to influence a whole lot of other factors. So in this instance, yes, you can go ahead and make it completely quad-based if you wanted to, but you can definitely use Ngons in subdivision surface modeling, and this is a great instance of how you can do that. Why does it work? Well, let's just show you really quickly. So I'm just going to change the subdivisions here from 4 to 1. I'm just going to apply the mirror and subdiv just to show you. So when you subdivide Ngons, they do resolve into quads, funnily enough, and same with triangles. So when we're subdividing this, even though we've got Ngons and triangles, you'll notice we're still keeping like a nice support loop that's actually running around and supporting all of these hard edges. So that's why it works despite having those Ngons and those triangles there. So yeah, just a little bit of fun modeling knowledge there for you. And if you're interested in learning more about Ngons and subdivision surface modeling, I highly recommend checking out Jordan Kane over on Twitter or Blue Sky, because he's got great educational material about this. But anyway, little side tangent over. Let's go ahead and apply our mirror modifier. And let's join our two meshes back together. So I'm going to select this front half, shift select this back half, Control J. We'll just enable smooth shading for everything. Tap into edit mode, and let's go ahead and merge by distance. And let's go ahead and just crease up the rest of these edges here. Oops. Probably should have done this at the start before we applied the array modifier. But this will work. Just a little bit more manual. Shift E 0.55. And so now that's going to be looking a lot nicer. So we're pretty much on the home stretch here. We've done the hardest part of this challenge. So let's just alt select this back part here, extrude it out along the x-axis, and then S, Shift, and X to scale on everything but the x-axis, kind of match that shape up here a little bit. And then we can just F to fill in a face, I to inset, and somewhere around there I think should be good. And then this should come back in on itself, so I'm going to place it around there. S, Shift, and X again. And just scale that so it fits on itself internally. And then we can just go insert again to add a support loop. Shift E -1 to get rid of the creasing on the inside there. And then I'm just going to add some additional support loops to these creased edges, because these are rather large faces. So what am I thinking of? The surface normals will be a little bit stretched, so we can just add in those support loops there, make everything nice and crisp. And then for the front here, if my memory serves me correctly, it's sort of like a hollowed out stud piece at the front or something that's going on here. I don't know exactly how this works. So let's just go ahead, let's select this, we'll delete these verts here. And I don't have a good size reference for the stud apart from this little piece at the front here. So I'm just going to use that as my point of reference. So I'm just going to alt select this loop here, Shift D. Going to drag it forward, and it's not quite the same size, so I'm just going to scale this down a little bit, somewhere around there, and then just G, X, hold down Control, just snap this back into place. I'm just going to select the outer loop, and then using loop tools, I'm just going to bridge these together, just speed up that process there a little bit. And actually, what I should have done, sorry, let's just go back a bit before I snap it. I'm just going to drag this back. I'm just going to extrude this out, just to be the same size as the stud piece here, just so it's more consistent. And then I'm going to flip the normals here with Alt-N, select this little stud piece, and then I'm just going to Shift deselect one of the verts at the back here, and then reselect it. And then if we go G, X, and Control, it will snap using the active object element, meaning that this edge will be in line with this edge here, and then we can do our bridge operation like so. Cool, and then for the little hollowed out stud piece, we can do something similar to the back, so we can just go F to fill in a face. It's gone to flat shading, so I'm just going to go smooth shading. Let's do an inset, somewhere around there. And then I'm going to extrude, push this back, and hold G, X, Control, and just snap that back to around there, and do another inset, Shift E -1. And I think that looks pretty good. Cool, and for the final touch, so if you just wanted to do the main megaphone, then this is all good. But for the final touch here, we can also model in this stud piece as well. And so I think an easy way to do that is let's just go Alt, select this edge here, so we'll go Shift D. And we can move this forward a little bit to add a little bit of that offset. And then let's extrude this out to the front here. We can add that little extruded point in just a second. For some reason, one of the faces has gone a little bit wonky here, so I'm just going to go Alt and recalculate outside. I'm also going to select it, P, separate by selection, and it's gone to smooth flat shading, so I'm just going to go smooth shading here. And working as a separate object will just make things a little bit more manageable for us here. Then just to save on time a little bit, let's go ahead, Alt select this inner edge, or this one here will work as well. So select that, bring it forward an arbitrary amount, P, separate by selection, and then let's select this ring, shift select our stud piece, Control J to join them together. Let's select this, G, X, Control to snap this back. And I'm just going to alt select both of these loops. We'll do a bridge operation, and then I can just extrude this out to roughly match that stud piece at the front there. We can do an inset, and I kind of feel like this isn't such a hard edge as the rest of them. So instead of doing an inset and crease here, I'm going to go Shift-E, -1 to remove the creasing altogether. And instead I'm going to use Control-B to do a bevel. And I might just add in 2 segments like that. Maybe just one more. Just give it a little bit more of a rounded profile at the front, and then also just do an inset here to add an extra support loop on the inside, and I think that gives a little bit of a nicer look. And then we just need to address this little bit of an extruded point here. So add in a loop at the back, E to extrude, S, Shift X, and we can just scale this out like so. And we're just missing a few creases here, so let's just go ahead, crease up this edge and this edge, Shift-E 0.55. And how's that looking with a subdiv? I think that looks pretty nice. And then the last thing is, let's just go ahead and we need to make this sort of connected. Well, sorry, have like an internal part so the stud can actually connect. And I think an easy way to do that is, let's just select this loop of faces here, Shift-D, P, separate by selection. Let's just hide the blaster model for a second. So we'll select the stud part that we just duplicated. We'll shift select the stud piece itself, Control-J to join them back together. The inner part here, we want to actually flip these normals, so we'll select everything, Alt-N and flip. And then we can run a bridge operation between these points to connect it together. And then fill in a face in the internal part here, I to do an inset for an extra support loop. And there we have it, that's our blaster model. Now you could always adjust the sizing and proportions of these. I kind of feel like this is probably a little bit too large, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to select the outer loops here really quickly. Oops. Hide that, I'll select this. And I'm just going to go S, Shift and X and just scale this down just a little bit. Just kind of feel like it's a little bit too large. I think that looks a little bit nicer. Cool. Now, if you're interested in doing the shading, I'll cover that, but if you just wanted to learn how to do the model, then that's all done and dusted. You're more than welcome to leave. So for the shading, it's very quite simple. So I'm just going to go to my shading slot here. I'm going to flip it over to cycles. I'm just going to bring in an HDRI here very quickly, so I don't need to bother about setting up any lighting of my own. Let's go to this one here. And I'm just going to go film transparent so I can focus more on the model. And I can just delete the boolean and the reference because I don't need those anymore. So for the hard plastic material, it's pretty simple. What we'll do is in our object, we'll just make a new material. So we can just call this like hard plastic. Plastic. And we can just bring the roughness down to something like 0.3, so it's a little bit more reflective. And then just in our base color, we can just drag this down to be a darker material. Something around here, I think looks pretty good. As for the stud, which is like more of a translucent material, we can do something very, very similar. So let's just make a new material. Let's call this one stud. We'll give it a nice bright red. So let's crank the hue up. Bring the green and blue down. So we've got this nice red. But we want it to be a little bit more translucent, a little bit see-through, right? So what we can do is we'll bring the roughness down to around 0.3 as well, so it's got the same reflectivity as the rest of it. And in the transmission here, I found that a value of weight of 0.9 works quite nicely. And it will ultimately really depend on your lighting setup as to how well this will look. I've got a pretty cheap and nasty lighting setup at the moment. But I think it gives the effect it gives a good effect to the material, and it might also help if we apply the scale of everything as well, just in case that's influencing anything. And in the original video I posted, I had like a normal map on the front of the Lego stud here. So you can actually find that very easily by just searching up a Lego normal map online. So if we just go Lego normal map logo, and funnily enough, this is the first thing that pops up. So you can just download that, and then what we can do is we can just drag and drop that into our shader here. And we can just change the color space from sRGB to non-color, get a normal map, plug the color into the normal here, and then we can just put that in between. And then we just need to do some very, very basic UVing here, nothing complicated. So let's just go to our UVing tab. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the front face here. So I'm just going to go Control plus to just select these two front faces. I'm going to go Shift and 7. Actually, I'll probably just go 3. And we'll go Unwrap, and we'll go Project View to Bounds. And now if we come back to our shading, you'll notice we've got the Lego indent here. And we can adjust it just a little bit more. So I'll just put this to shading. We can just adjust this a little bit more, sorry. Now UVs here, just by scaling this down and sort of bringing it a little bit more in line. So it's probably not working that well. So we probably need some of these outer edges as well. So I might just go Control plus twice. And then U, project from bounds. And scale this down. And we can get something a little bit more like that, which just adds to the authenticity just a little bit. And I think it's a little bit too intense. It doesn't really catch the light that nicely. So if you change the strength to like 0.4, I think it just sort of reduces that intensity a little bit and just makes it look a little bit nicer. So yeah, there you go. That's how we can make a Lego megaphone or blaster in Blender. And I'll see you all in the next tutorial.